The views, statements, and opinions expressed in this episode are solely our own, including our guest, and these do not necessarily represent those of our employers.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi, I'm Georgie.
And I'm VG.
Welcome to our podcast, Diversity and Inclusion, Satisfying the Tick Box. In today's episode, we're going to be covering the power of privilege, allyship, and leadership. So just to give a brief overview of these things, privilege describes the benefits that belong to people because they fit into a special social group or have certain dimensions to their identity, which is also linked to allyship. So an ally is often defined as someone who is not a member of a marginalised group, but wants to support and take action to help others in that group.
So we have a very special guest joining us today. We've got David Penberthy, who will be sharing his personal journey and experiences with us regarding privilege, allyship, and leadership. So welcome, David. Could you give us a quick introduction to let the listeners know who you are and a bit about your story?
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Vigi, and really pleased to be on the podcast today, and looking forward to talking with you and Georgie. So yeah, I'm David Penberthy. I'm a vice president of a tech company, and I've been doing this kind of role for the last few years. I'm also a mentor, and I think Vigi will touch on that in a moment, at City University in London. And I grew up in Exeter in Devon a few years ago now. And Exeter is it's a place that's not particularly diverse. It certainly wasn't when I grew up, and still kind of isn't really today as well. But I grew up there, had a reasonably comfortable kind of upbringing, had both my parents, one brother, always employed, managed a foreign holiday a year, all of those things. My parents worked hard, and they worked hard to make sure we could have those things that we needed to. And yeah, kind of progressed through my career to there, really.
Thank you, David, for giving us a quick introduction to yourself, and welcome to our podcast. And yes, you mentioned mentoring. So just for the listeners, David and I go back to 2018 when I was actually doing my master's degree at City University of London. And I was actually paired with David through the fantastic professional mentoring program that the university ran. And what that program is about, it pairs students with industry professionals in order to develop their skills, confidence, and future employability. And that was quite relevant to me at that time because I was going through that career change from policing to IT. So shout out to City University for that fantastic program that they run. So let's break it down then, David, in terms of growing up. How was, for example, school life for you?
Yeah, so it was fine. I went to kind of a normal comprehensive school through that time. It was good. I was reasonably successful at some sports teams, so managed to kind of fit in fairly well at school. I was a average student and worked reasonably hard, but not massively talented, I would say, but always worked hard and had a kind of strong work ethic instilled into me from my family, I think. I left school at 16, and I went straight away to train as an accountant. So I didn't go to A levels, I didn't go to further education, and I didn't go through a higher education process. But yeah, it was a good upbringing, which I enjoyed well.
Just to touch on that, not going to university and A levels, was there a reason for that, or were you just, it wasn't for you?
I think it just wasn't something had ever really happened with my family before. So it wasn't a conscious decision. I think if I really pushed for it, I'm sure my parents would have worked out a way to support me. But because they hadn't been to university, it wasn't something they'd done. It wasn't really an obvious thing to do. Do I regret that? I do. I think I'm not sure I would be any further in my career than where I am now. I possibly would have got there a little bit quicker. But I do sometimes feel it's definitely something that hangs over me when I feel not equal maybe to some of my peers or others, where I feel that I really should have had that background. It's probably a crazy thought to have, but it's definitely something that I'm challenged with for sure.
And I can relate to you in some ways, David. My parents were refugees from Sri Lanka because of the civil war that had happened there. And they didn't have any formal education or even attended university. So for me growing up, it was going into the unknown, if you like. So where do I go, in terms of my higher education, or where do I go with my career? And that was quite difficult in trying to find the answers, because I remember quite clearly when I was seeking guidance and going to my parents for advice, I'd get very general answers like, oh, do what you like. And for me, I think it was very much trial and error for me in terms of education and career growing up. Even thinking about it, and this is making me laugh right now. I remember my sister Shabs, who's exactly 1 year older than me. She got 4 A's for AS levels in chemistry, maths, biology, and French. Quite difficult subjects. And me being me, I thought, hey, if she can get 4 A's, then I can get 4 A's. And boy, did that backfire on me. Probably one of the worst decisions that I made. But then again, if I had that guidance, it could have probably been a different story right now. I don't know. I wanted to ask then, so you've jumped straight into accountancy, and how was that for you? Because were your parents still guiding you? Were they giving you advice about where you should be taking your career or where you
Sure.
should be going?
Yeah. So my dad was an accountant. That was his background. He progressed into other roles and had a pretty successful career as a director and leading motor dealerships in the southwest. But fundamentally, his background was an accountant, and I kind of went into that thinking it would just be a really good grounding to have, and to be honest, it really has. It's helped me so much throughout all of my career. Just that background and having that kind of solid understanding of business, understanding of really has given me some really strong principles. I didn't really work as an accountant at all after I kind of finished my studying. I went straight into working into IT, into software, into services, and I've been doing that for the last 20 plus years. But that background's been really important for me for sure.
I mean, not going to university, you're probably better for all the debt that comes out of it. But so you were speaking about your dad, would you say he was your kind of positive role model in your life, and how did that kind of impact you?
I think I think my family definitely impacted me. I think when we talk about diversity and inclusion, my, and even though I grew up in a part of the country that wasn't particularly diverse, my parents were just and are just really good people, and they've always brought myself and my brother up to never think about people differently, no matter what their background is, where they've come from, any disability or education. It's just been a normal thing for us. So for me growing up, I don't believe I really saw people differently. And I think that was instilled from my parents and also my grandparents, who came from a different time, but they still always were just good people who didn't really see people differently. And I think that really helped me. And their hard work. They worked hard to expose myself and my brother to different things. We had a foreign language students staying with us virtually all the time when I was growing up. So we had people from other parts of Europe and further afield coming and staying in our house. And that really helped us understand different backgrounds, cultures, people who are coming to a different country. And I think at the time I didn't really think about it, but looking back, I'm sure that helped us a lot turn into the people we are today.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think for me, having my Auntie Mary, who identifies as a lesbian, I think that definitely helped me to kind of, I guess, not just see, because I grew up in Wimbledon, and I think it was mainly white people there. So I
Sure.
think my parents were exactly the same. So they were very much just people are people, like you don't have to see anyone differently. And yeah, having my auntie definitely helped. Vigi, I don't know if about you.
For me, my parents moved us from France to the UK, and everything I saw them facing coming to a new country, learn a new language, that's quite hard when you leave your motherland. And they were like every other parent, trying to provide the best for 5 children. And a lot of people ask me, where does your motivation or drive come through, Vij? And for me, it's very much from seeing my parents work really hard for what they got. whatever they've got, I'm going to double, triple, even times about 4 or 5. That's where really my motivation lies. And even though I doubt that my parents are going to listen to this podcast, but I've never really said thank you to them for making me who I am today. So, mum and dad, if you're listening to this, thank you.
And I think, Vijay, that's great. And I think from someone who's a parent now myself, you don't have to say thank you. I think for them just seeing who you've turned into, what you're achieving, the difference you're making, I'm sure for you and your kind of siblings as well, it makes them proud enough. So, yeah, I'm sure they see that.
Oh, thank you, David. That's really nice of you. And I am still on that learning journey, but I must say I've benefited massively from having a mentor like you to guide me, to really show me the way or the path that I could possibly take. And I came across a good quote that always stuck with me. It's stay hungry, stay humble. And it's very much about that underdog mentality. And I will take that as a navigate through my life, my career. I wanted to kind of move on into, have you ever suffered imposter syndrome, David? Because I do. There's a couple of moments in my life where I've had really bad imposter syndrome. Have you ever had suffered that in any moments in your career or your personal life?
I think a little bit around my educational background, as we spoke about earlier. I think certainly that I do still feel that now, much less than I did a few years ago. But that's probably the biggest example. I can remember a few years ago, I was at a company kickoff meeting in the US, and it was a leadership meeting, and everybody was stood around, and it was step forward if you have these things. If you have a sibling, if you have a brother, if you've been to university. And I can remember there was about 70 of us in this group of various leaders. And I think there was only me and one other person who didn't step forward, who hadn't been to university. And you could think about that in two ways: either find it very difficult and a little bit embarrassing, or actually something you could be quite proud of, that you were in that group with all those people without having to have done that as well. So yeah, I think that's the example I would take there for sure.
I would definitely take it as that second kind of perspective. It's very impressive that without kind of A levels and university, you still managed to kind of be in the same room as people that had gone to university. So I think that's incredible. Just another kind of question around allyship. What would you say allyship means to you, and how can we kind of be good allies from a leadership perspective?
Sure. And Georgie, I thought about this quite a bit over the last few weeks and over the last few months, really. And initially I thought, it's just really being a good person. And I believe as a leader and a manager, I don't discriminate. I think I do recruit people into my team, give everybody equal opportunities and all of those things. And I think I thought in the past, well, if I give people all those opportunities, then it's just all down to people's own talent and their own ambition and the hard work. But actually, I don't think it is. I think there are some groups and some people who do need a little bit more support through no fault of their own, through perception or some discrimination, and wider that it is just there. So I think people do need champions, and I think they do need some more support. And I think it's important that that's identified and understood. I think one thing that's helped me is I have a 12-year-old son who was identified as autistic a few years ago. And I think going through that process of understanding him, how he thinks, wondering about what that will mean when he enters the world of work and all those things has really helped me, again, understand some of those challenges that he might have in the future, and making sure I kind of make it as support people as much as I can. And also, I think going back to the mentoring that Vijay mentioned earlier, I think I've had 8 or 9 different mentees now over the last 5 or 6 years. And I think in that time, I've only had one person who you would consider coming from privilege. And I think working with those people and understanding the challenges that people have, whether they've come from a different country, have a different background, whatever that might be, has really helped me understand what I need to do as a leader and a mentor and things to support people. So I'm not sure if that really answers your question. I think it's about supporting people, understanding people, championing diversity, and giving people as much opportunity, and understanding when you need to give certain people or groups of people a little bit of extra help as well.
If you've got privilege, you should definitely be using it for good. So just educating yourself on different forms of oppression is really important. Understanding and being aware of, I guess, your privilege in the workplace, and then just being able to champion those that may not have that same privilege is so important. And it sounds like what you're doing is incredible, especially with the mentorship. I don't know, Viji, could you give a bit more around the mentorship aspect?
Yes, of course. I'd like to take this moment actually to thank you, David, because I know that the mentorship program that we were in was only for about 6 months at that time at university, but you've always kept your doors open for me and always enable me to contact you. Even I remember when I had that interview for a large tech organization, you gave me your time the day before. We sat down, you put me at ease with, how the interview process will go. And that's something that I'm most grateful about. So thank you, David, because it's not, like I said, I don't having that for me was really supportive, but it's also about it put me at ease to go on to that interview and actually smash it. So thank you, David, because I've never actually said like thank you properly to you either.
No, that's fine. But, mentorship works both ways, and you need to have somebody who's totally engaged and wants to work with you as well. So that's what makes it a successful kind of mentoring relationship for sure. So, but selfishly, I've got a massive amount out of mentoring. Whether that's been through my normal work or outside of work through City University, and it's been great, and I've learned so much from working with all of my mentees, and I've learned a lot from you, Viji, and I think your background of that you've explained earlier, moving in the police, deciding that you wanted to work in tech, and quite honestly, I hope you don't mind me saying this, not really knowing what that meant or what type of role that you might want to do, just an ambition really to work in tech, and kind of going through that journey of thinking about how that could help and helping to talk through those challenges and how we work through that was really satisfying. So it's great to see.
And I remember those conversations, those early conversations, David, was like, oh, this project management, business analyst, but don't really know what I'm doing here. And I'm trying to pick you up right there because I was actually in a position where I didn't really know. Like you said, I wanted to be in tech, and that's where I was going towards moving, transitioning, but trying to find that role that I was fit into. I was trying to work that out. But what the conversation that we had, of course, it wasn't just that, it was also the soft skills that you were helping me with. So for example, that CV review, just how to prepare for an interview. Those are the things that for someone that's in my position of going through that change with similar circumstances, it's huge. It's a huge opportunity for me as well, just to understand what I'm getting into, and to have advice and guidance for someone who's been there, done that. It's golden nuggets.
Sure. No, there's thousands of people who act as mentors all over the country and over the world, and I'd encourage anyone else listening, or both of you as well, to consider becoming a mentor. You never Any time in your career you can definitely help people and use your experience to help people. It's really satisfying, and I'd encourage anybody to do it.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. And so would you say that mentorship is key for kind of improving D&I in organizations? Would you say that it makes a massive difference?
I certainly think it helps. I think it helps both the mentor and the mentee, and I think it helps just understanding people. Really, the more time you spend talking to people, you understand. To mentor somebody, you really need to understand a bit about their background, their challenges, and I think once you understand people more, and you understand their backgrounds, it just helps you as a leader, as a person, which has got to help D&I for sure.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main reasons we do this podcast, is because I guess speaking to people from these different backgrounds and allowing other people to listen in, I think that just increases people's kind of awareness and things like that, which definitely helps in the workplace, I think.
And I was going to ask David then, as a leader, I want to talk more about in the workplace and how, as a leader, you can use that position of influence for greater good. Where do you think the focus for organizations should be in terms of D&I going forward?
Yeah, I think lots of organizations are not grappling with this, but on the journey to work through D&I to improve it, establish processes, establish groups, communities of belonging, employee resource groups, all of those types of things, which are called different things in different organizations, and they're all done with positive intent. They're all done with the right intent to make things better. But just setting up those groups, just making those things happen, doesn't mean it's finished. It's almost something that needs to be embedded through the culture of the organization, embedded through everything that you do and how you work. And where I work currently, this is actually one of our four key pillars and objectives for the coming year, is to make sure that we have D&I at the heart of everything we do. And I'm really proud to work for an organization that has that there. So I think there's definitely a lot there. I also think different parts of the world, different sectors are quite different as well. And I see that perception. I work for a global organization. In my previous role, I led teams in both the UK and the Middle East. So very diverse kind of teams as well. And I think sometimes for some of us on this call who work in tech in London, it can be a little bit of a bubble, which is not always the same in every other industry, every other sector, and every other part of the UK and the world. So understanding that, I think, is important as well. So yeah, really important. And having a really diverse team is so important to the business as well. Having different perceptions, having people with different ideas, different backgrounds really helps creativity. It helps the business improve so much, and is really important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think getting those different perspectives and different kind of viewpoints on um, things in business is definitely key. Just from what you were saying just then, what are kind of some of the things that you as a leader and an organisation are doing currently in relation to D&I?
Sure, yeah. So in my current employer, we have several communities of belonging, which are groups that we bring together both virtually and face to face. And they are different communities that might cover neurodiversity, might be for Asian and Pacific Islanders, might be for LGBTQ communities. So a variety of different communities of belonging, which brings people together. And some of those people will belong to those groups. Some people will be allies of those groups. And I think it's really important because it helps people understand there is diversity in our organization. It helps people connect with each other, and it helps people outside of those groups understand more about people in those groups and the benefits they can bring and what support we might need to give as well. So I think that's an example where I'm seeing something really working well in my current employer. I think for me personally, I think it's just making sure that I'm conscious of what I do. And I think conscious is really important, but there's also the unconscious bias, which I'm always aware of as well. And I think that's something that's always kind of hanging over my head. Am I really doing what I think I'm doing, or do I need to validate that sometimes? And I'm lucky. I have a really diverse team in my current team, and my leadership team and management team is really diverse as well. And I will work with that team and ask them to keep me honest, make sure I am doing everything I need to, validate my thinking, get ideas from them, and also call me out if they think occasionally I'm not quite living up to the values that I hope to as well. And I'm very open and happy to be called out if that ever happens. And it does sometimes. None of us are perfect, for sure.
I think that's exactly what you've just said is so key with unconscious bias, is just being kind of that self-aware and getting other people to kind of check you sometimes, because it's obviously unconscious as it's in the name, so you don't sometimes know that you're doing these things or saying these things. So that's really important. And I think also with those the things that you're doing in your organization. I think it's so important for people that just not those that just belong to those groups, but also people that don't come from those groups and don't and kind of have a bit more privilege maybe to join in those employee resource groups. I think that's really key.
It is, and there's a really good example where we have I think the group is called the Sisterhood Group. So it's for female members of our team, and our sponsor for that group is our CRO, who is someone who you'd consider to come from privilege, but he's our sponsor for that group and leads it well and champions that group. And he wrote a fantastic blog just a few months ago about the challenge of leading that group, but coming from privilege and unconscious bias as well. And it's really great to work for an organization that have executives that think like that and are open to publicly highlight why they think they made a mistake and how they're learning now to lead that group as well. I learn a lot from that for sure.
That is amazing, actually, David. And I was going to ask you, David, so have you created a safe space for individuals as well if something doesn't go right, where they can come and speak and share their experiences?
I think not deliberately, Vijay. So, excuse me, there's no deliberate safe space. I just hope that through my fairly open leadership style, and I know from my management and my leadership team that, again, they're a very open team. I would very much hope that everybody feels there's a safe space to work through that. And if they're not happy or comfortable speaking with one person, I hope they know that they can go and speak to another. But I think just from that question, it's made me question myself whether that's something that we should have in place, and definitely something I'll put a little bit more thought to for sure.
So we ask all our guests for kind of one key takeaway at the end of each episode. So what would your main key takeaway be from this episode?
I think I've alluded to this as we've been talking already, but I think always assume positive intent. Always assume that the person who's doing something has that positive intent and they're trying to do things for the right reason. There might be some unconscious bias there. They might just not be sure of what they're doing, but assume that what they're trying to do is for the right reasons. And if it doesn't come across that way, hopefully there is a safe space and there is enough openness to highlight that with that person, who will then understand it and improve for the future. It's important to think as leaders that you need to make sure that you live all of these values, but it's also important for other people to call that out sometimes, because as I mentioned, we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect, and we might have that positive intent, and we need that good collaborative two-way open communication so we can all improve.
100%. I think it's so important just to also be kind of self-aware and get other people's input. So yeah, that is a great key takeaway.
And adding to your point, David, about having diverse teams, as a minority ethnic individual, there is an element of you need to see it to believe it. And what I mean by that is that I need to be able to see people like me in leadership positions or higher positions or positions that I aspire to be, to give me that belief and confidence that I can make it one day. Thank you so much, David, for coming on our podcast. And I want to personally thank you for being a great mentor and an even better friend. And you always give me your time, like I said, and guiding me the right way. And I've never actually got to thank you properly. So thank you.
No, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk with you today. And also, thank you for you both for running this podcast. It's great. I think it's giving lots of people an opportunity to get more understanding of D&I and what's going on. And thank you both for highlighting this and being so passionate about it. And it will make a really big difference both now and in the future. So thank you for me.
Thank you as well for joining us today. It's been really, really insightful to kind of hear it from a leadership perspective. And thank you to our listeners for joining us this week as well. Please make sure you're following our podcast on Spotify and feel free to give it a rating and review as well.
So keep your eyes peeled for our next guest, and our episode will be dropping next month. And we'll see you next time on Diversity and Inclusion, Satisfying the Tick Box.